Just kidding. Okay, good. Welcome to True Health Tuesdays. Tonight we're talking about diabetes. Now, what's frustrating is I've got a number of medical doctors, nutritionists, and when you talk about the cure for diabetes, people get really upset with that because curing diabetes, that means going through, correcting it to where you don't have it anymore. Okay, well, let's look at this. Now, the diabetes trends are linked to obesity, but why? Now, these are the diabetic trends, okay, and we're talking from 1990 to 2000, and you're seeing that it's becoming an epidemic. So what happened in the mid-90s to cause it? I mean, this one here is the obesity epidemic, 1990 to 2008. Now, it correlates, but not the way you would think. It's not just toxic food. It has to do with how we are. Now, this kid is not obese. He's being poisoned. He's in a calorie-rich, nutrition-poor environment. And if the body can't process nutrients, it's going to store them. Now, what you're looking at is his skin is swollen up because he can't process those nutrients. It's storing them in the form of fat, which is the most energy-efficient method the body can do. However, fat becomes a hormone-producing organ called leptin. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of leptin because this is mainly ignored by the medical world, okay, because it's actually, fat becomes an endocrine-producing organ, such as the pancreas, ovaries, pituitary. Now, this is out of the Journal of Cell Metabolism, and it's interesting what they're talking about because we got to break down some barriers because there's people still thinking that a diabetic should have diet soda, they should have diet products, and they should avoid sugars. And let's read this. Like two peas in a pod, obesity and type 2 diabetes go together. Popular belief that if one eats too much sugar, they'll get fat and develop diabetes. If they don't get diabetes, it's merely because their body is producing enough insulin to keep up with the sugar. That's the common thought. It's not true. However, researchers have discovered evidence that there's more to obesity-diabetes connection than the classic way of thinking. The missing link is leptin. Now, this is huge because when we look at what it's affecting, a third, look to your left, look to your right, one of you guys has diabetes. Okay, or statistically, not in this group. This group, you figure you're taking time out of your day to learn stuff that's radically different than the, and I don't want to say traditional medical world because traditional medicine, I'm talking thousands of years old, like Ayurvedic medicine, herbology, chiropractic. First adjustment was 2700 BC. So that I look at as traditional. This modern medicine of treating symptoms with chemicals is insanity. Now, 95% of all diabetics are type 2. So if we're talking 30% of America has it, and 95% of those are type 2, and type 2 is from poisoning, does that mean that 95% of all diabetics in America are being poisoned? Absolutely. Now, when we look at this, type 1 used to be called childhood onset. Okay, and this is, how many people remember that? Do you remember? Okay, they don't call it that anymore because adults started to have their pancreas blown out. Now, type 1 is where the body is actually attaching or attacking the cells of the pancreas, disallowing the pancreas to produce enough insulin. And since the pancreas isn't working correctly, the body begins to decay because of elevations of sugar and toxins. Now, type 2, they used to call that adult onset, and they figured that this is from eating toxic food, and it just kind of happened. Okay, no one was quite sure because they kept on thinking sugar, and that's why we're doing the talk tonight, because we want to break that mindset that it's not the sugar. I mean, toxic genetically modified beet sugar is not good for you. Okay, I mean, if you feed it to a dog, he's going to die. However, now we're getting a combination of type 1 and type 2. So let's look into the important part. Now, a lot of people, because I'm going to bring up some solutions, and the solutions are going raw vegetables for about 30 to 45 days. And I get a lot of people saying, well, doc, the diet's just too restrictive. Okay, now look, it depends on how you present it. Okay, if you say, Well, you're going to have to go on a restrictive diet for about 30 to 45 days. Within 5 days, your blood sugar is going to normalize, so you can stop the medications within 5 days. In about 30 to 45 days, you'll be healed. Okay, and then you can go back. You're never going to be able to go back and eat poisonous food, but at least you can eat, this cooked food and cooked vegetables. Now, there's a group of dietitians, nutritionalists, and medical doctors that come to our practice, and they say people won't follow that. I said, well, I present it, 30 to 45 days you're going to be healed. If not, stroke, heart failure, hardening of the arteries, elevations in cholesterol, impotence. Anybody want to be impotent? Okay, good, just checking. Neuropathy, retinopathy, blindness? Blindness, anyone? I know, it's fun to see. Okay, then you look at this, liver failure, renal failure, and you're thinking, well, renal failure, I got 2 kidneys, so I could probably survive that, but liver failure, don't. Okay, you only have one of those, right? So multiple cysts on the ovaries, poor wound healing, peripheral neuropathy, your toes are going to get purple, fall off, die. So I say, you got 30 to 45 days. We're going to get your body healthy. Within 5 days, your blood sugar is going to be normalized. You can stop the drugs. And if you don't do this, you'll be impotent, blind, and will have to cut your feet off. Okay. So, I haven't had one person not follow my advice. It's pretty clear. Now, the frustrating thing is this is actually a viable option in some people's minds. Now, this is out of the British Medical Journal. See, what they did is they found out that if you took a drug, such as metformin or glucophage, it'll lower blood glucose. Raise your hand if you've heard that. Okay, it does. However, insulin levels remain high. Now, remember, the body doesn't do anything unintelligent. Every reaction that the body does is intelligent. So if you're forcing that blood sugar down and insulin levels remain high, you got the insulin floating around. Now, when we look at this, there's a 47% increase in congestive heart failure. I know that's a bummer because we only have one heart. But if you reduce blood glucose 9%, you get a 14% increase in death. If you reduce it 19% or 14%, you have a 43% increase in death. So how could this possibly be a viable option when somebody's presenting 95% of 30% of the population in America, okay, so that's like a lot of people, and we're talking can be cured within 30 to 45 days, this isn't an option. Well, you got to give it to them until they make the lifestyle changes. You give them the drug, they die early. Okay, so that's not an option. Now, we are getting type 3 diabetes. It's a combination of type 2 and type 1. It's now type 3. Because if you treat type 2 incorrectly, and that's 95% of all of them, you're going to see that there's going to be a combination where the pancreas will work really good sometimes and not work really good, then work really good and then not work really good. So you're going to have spikes in blood sugar going up and down. Well, that's foolish because type 2 is correctable. So what you really need to do in order to correct diabetes, this is the primary number one thing, is make the patient aware. Because right now, they're in a mindset that diabetes can't be cured, can't be corrected. They got it from bad luck or bad genes. Okay, and none of those are true. Oh, my uncle had diabetes. I'm sorry, it's not genetic. Okay, so you've got to change the mindset first when you look at that. Let's look at history, because before 1900, we're talking almost nobody had diabetes, not a third of the population. And when you look at it, you might say, well, 1900, God, Americans were a bunch of fanatics. They had nothing but organic fruits and vegetables. They had nothing but healthy, raw, no antibiotics or hormones in the milk. And you're thinking, damn. That's why probably they had like really low cancer rates, only 3% of the population. So in 1900, America was a bunch of health nuts. Okay, well, Crisco decided to be invented about 1900. Now, if you had fresh organic butter, because that's all the butter that was there, okay, and you had a choice of synthetic fat, which would you choose? Yeah, they couldn't sell it. Okay, it was a bummer. Even though it had limitless shelf life, it was fantastic. Okay, it didn't taste particularly good, but it was high heat, and it was a chemical product. Well, it didn't take off until the 30s, because it was cheaper to have this chemical product instead of the healthy butter. So when the 30s took off, that's when sales took off. And also, too, in World War I, there was, and World War II comes around, we had butter shortages in America, and then Crisco again went off like crazy. So in 1900, the diabetes rate was, and you're reading that correctly, 0.0028% of America. So you can look at tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000. So that's 28 10,000ths of a percent. Now it's 30%. Okay, so it was a bit different. Now, so it zoomed between those 30 years, it increased 1,000% in the United States. Anytime you have a disease that doesn't double, doesn't triple, doesn't go up 100-fold, doesn't go up 500-fold, it goes up 1,000%. Should you maybe take a second look at what therapies you're doing and where it's from? I would think so too. Well, in 1922, these guys won a Nobel Prize for developing insulin. Okay, they actually found that they could get it by experimenting on dogs, and they injected a girl with type 1 diabetes, and she lived. And so this was brilliant. The way that they used to check to see if you had a blood sugar issue, they would taste the blood, or they would taste the urine. Okay, they would actually have a dog, be attracted to the sweetness of the urine and the blood. So when you look at this, that was how they diagnosed it. Now, in 1933, and this is a brilliant article too out of the Journal of the American Medical, they found a new rogue form of the diabetes. So remember, we're talking just the depression hitting. The synthetic fats are now being utilized everywhere. And there's a weird type of diabetes that showed up. How was diabetes diagnosed? There wasn't any serum assays. You would, smell and you would have a dog lick the urine, and you would taste the blood, and you would taste sweetness. Well, a major epidemic. Okay, it looked a lot like the diabetes of the 20s. However, it didn't respond to the wonder drug. In fact, if you shot somebody with insulin, they could die. And this is the culprit. It's shifting the fats. And this is what we're doing today as well. We've stopped the healthy palm oil and coconut oil and the healthy saturated fats, and we're replacing it with the junk oils, the margarine, the cottonseed oil, the soy oil. Now, this is just replacing the crappy oils. Okay, it's not the genetically modified oils. That's insult on top of insult. Okay, so it's really what we're doing. Now, the insulin-resistant diabetes, and sorry about the small print, but when you look at it, it was insulin because when you would inject insulin, you would remember there was no serum assays to tell what the blood sugar levels were like. You just had to smell it or taste it. So you had sweet blood, your pancreas might have been damaged by a vaccine or some kind of toxin. You might have been poisoned by fats, toxic fats. So you don't know. There's no assay to find out where it's from. However, back in the 20s and 30s, there was a number of doctors out there who knew that if you treated it with healthy fats and you got these people off of the toxic chemicals, that they recovered. Now, it's interesting. Finally, in 1950, you could actually assess the serum. You could look at the blood test. And it wasn't classic diabetes. In fact, it had excessive amounts or sufficient blood insulin levels. So you're thinking, well, wait a second. The pancreas is working appropriate in a lot of times in type 2 diabetes. Now, that's kind of interesting because how could you possibly take a drug that lowers glucose but insulin levels remain high? Wait a second. Remember the results of that drug, the metformin and glucophage? Now, when we're looking at this, in 1950, we knew that in type 2 diabetes, there was a lot of toxic sugar in the blood, but the insulin levels were a sufficient amount. So now we're giving a drug that lowers the glucose, but insulin levels are fine in those patients. What happens to the patient if we chemically lower the glucose? They die early. Okay, so when we look at this, it wasn't effective, and it's frustrating. So now what we have to start educating the public on. The classic definition of diabetes is a failure to metabolize carbohydrates. Okay, and we're talking going back to the 19th century. Why? Because it tastes sweet. The current definition of type 2 is a failure of the body to metabolize fats and oils properly. That's fact. Okay, so, and then when you look at this, oh, you might be wondering about that picture over there on the right-hand side. That's actually a physician in the 1300s. That's what doctors used to wear. I know. You're thinking, damn, that man had flair. But the nose was filled with herbs, okay? He had red lenses on because they knew at the time that disease came from evil spirits, sin, and bad humors, bad smells. So that is actually a doctor's garb. I think the man had a lot of flair. But the reason I put that is because that's an ignorant view. It wasn't based in science. It wasn't even based in observation. Okay, it was based on legend. Well, these three groups here are still doing legend. The American Dietetic Association, American Heart Association, and American Diabetes. They're all recommending complex carbohydrates. They're recommending diet products. They're recommending synthetic sugars, synthetic fats. I mean, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. The American Heart Association advocate vegetable oils, canola, safflower, soybean, olive oil. They're advocating polyunsaturated fats. The polyunsaturated fats slow down the thyroid, put you in a stress state where the adrenals are taxed. I mean, this is not only bad advice, it's actually toxic. This was an article that came out a couple of weeks ago on salt intake. Now, the American Heart Association, in addition to recommending toxic doses of fats and toxic fats, their salt recommendation of 1.5 grams per deciliter here, the American Heart Association, that's their line and that's the death line. So if you triple their recommendation of salt, take 3 times as much salt as they recommend, you have 1/3 the amount of death. I'm sorry, if you triple the amount of salt that they tell you to take in, and they're not even talking about healthy salt, you have 1/3 the amount of death. Okay, so when you look at this, and this was actually Eric Topol, brilliant guy. Look at this. But I think there's a big lesson about guidelines. Without adequate evidence, they can do harm. That's true. See, when a doctor gives you advice to reduce this, take this pill, change this, is that based in science? If all of us took the same drug, would we have the same response? No. If all of us took the same food, we'd have a better chance of having a similar response, but not the same. Okay, so when we look at this, hopefully this lesson will prove to be impactful because that certainly has not been the case to date. Cholesterol levels are a massive question. Blood pressure levels, a massive question. PSA tests, mammography, and a list of long, poorly conceived, non-anchored guidelines. Excuse me. Isn't it about time to recognize that there shouldn't be rules for populations? Some people are exquisitely sensitive to salt intake while others are remarkably resistant. The average is over. So we have to stop this. The recommendations of what the doctors are doing is bad. Oh man, I was going to say this will come true when pigs fly. Okay, never mind. Okay, so when you look at this, problems with low cholesterol. If you take a cholesterol-lowering drug, you have a 30% increase of diabetes. We know this. Now, what does cholesterol-lowering drugs do? Blood sugar, swelling, mineral deficiencies, chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation, again, what does that do? It taxes the adrenals. It slows down the thyroid. You slow down the thyroid and you're talking about a metabolic problem? No wonder it hurts with diabetes. Reduced libido, again, infertility, reproductive problems. It's interesting. Here's a study comparing low cholesterol levels and heart problems. It turns out that researchers found for every point of cholesterol decreased, there was a 36% increase in death within 3 years. So those cholesterol-lowering drugs, it's not based in science. We know this. Now, these guys are rebels. If you get a chance, like I was doing research on heart disease. I go in there, I found a book, Reversing Heart Disease, by a medical doctor. What do you think? Let's get the book. Doing some research on diabetes. Oh, how to cure diabetes. Oh, I like that. Let's read it. Okay, now what's interesting is you look at these guys and the book and the information is out there. They're just doing what we've always done. They're not looking and following like a lemming jumping off a cliff. Okay, they're actually doing observational studies in their office. They're saying, look, I'm going to try this, with this patient. I'm going to try this with this patient. Something that Aristotle and Plato, and I mean, Hippocrates would do. Aristotle and Plato, they would use observation. They would look at the moon and the stars and physics. These brilliant minds would come up with this. They're not just following, what they think is supposed to be, it's not cookie cutter medicine. These guys are rebels, okay? And when you look at this, diet sodas, guess what the American Diabetes Association is still recommending? Diet sodas. Okay, this thing talks about a massive increase in obesity if you take diet sodas. Remember, obesity causes the fat to become an endocrine-producing organ. This is, I know it's a lot of information, but if you look at it, insulin's major role is not to lower sugar, but it's to take the extra energy when available and store it for future times of need. Insulin lowers glucose as a side effect of directing the extra energy in the storage. The food that we're being exposed to is high calories. What's calorie? It's a unit of heat to raise 1 liter of water 1 degree centigrade. So a calorie is energy. And if it's a high calorie, nutrition poor, in our environment that we're eating this food, insulin has to be produced a lot. Now, when we look at this is stressful, okay? Or am I the only one that's scared of tigers running around free? Okay. Understand, remember, 1 in 3 Americans have diabetes, okay, type 2. The body doesn't do anything unintelligent. So when you have elevations in blood sugar, if you have elevations in stress, remember, physical, chemical, and emotional stress, your body has the same reaction. This right here could be emotional stress because you're getting prepared for physical stress. So blood supply to the gut's going to shut down. So is digestive issues just an indication of stress? High blood pressure is not a disease. It's a clue that the body's under stress. High cholesterol is not a disease. It's a clue the body's under stress. Decreased blood supply to the gut, slow wound healing. Again, it's a clue that the body's under stress. So not everybody has the same stressors. That's why it's ignorant to treat blood pressure and cholesterol and diabetes with the same drug on the same people in the same way. Does that make sense? Find the stressors and fix it. And it seems like ridiculous. I love this one. Rarely do you see journal articles that say this medical therapy is proven to cause a disease. This one's been around since 2002. 2,000 doctors attending a conference. They say vaccines are proven to cause diabetes. Why? You're injecting foreign proteins in the bloodstream. The definition of allergy is the body abnormal recognition of a foreign protein. If you build antibodies to those antibodies can also attack other organs. We know this is in Hashimoto's for the thyroiditis. We also know vaccine-induced diabetes. So should one drug be given to everybody in America? Or should 81 vaccines be given to every child? Okay, it's just ignorance on top of ignorance. Here's the solution. Now, I've got these solutions in our natural diabetes. Okay, so it's in our handout. But when we look at it, you're taking up energy. So walking a half hour a day, burning up energy is ideal. And exercise prescribed. It's really that simple and easy. Repair faulty blood sugar, and this is consuming healthy fats. And I know it's small print, but I wrote it out larger there for you. Controlling blood sugar naturally by consuming frequent meals. And this is just how you correct diabetes. You can, after 30 to 45 days, when your blood sugar is normal and everything's working right, you can't go back to eating toxic food, but you can go back to expanding your diet a little bit so you're healing your system. Now, this is literally the exercise and reduction. Walking, eating food, making sure that it's non-GMO. This one, I have to tell this story because when it talks about chiropractic and diabetes, I was lucky enough to be the last class that Dr. Carl Cleveland II taught. Now this guy is, in the entire Cleveland family is legendary. They've been around for forever. And I actually, studied at his school. Well, he's telling us now, here's this guy, nearly 80, telling about his grandma. So when you're 80 and you're talking about your grandma, was really special to him. Farm girl in 1906, she develops diabetes, the sugar disease. And they said, well, you have no blood glowing to your toes. Your one leg's purple. You've got slow wound healing. You've got dropsy, diabetes, cystic tumors, ulcerations on the leg. You're going to be dead in about 3 to 4 months. Okay, we'd amputate, but that's really not going to help you prolong it. And so her sister says, have you ever been to a chiropractor? She said, chiropractor, what's that? I don't know, they do something with healing. See, chiropractic was never for back pain or neck pain. Okay, it was a healing art working with the nervous system. It's only in the 70s when a lot of chiropractors decided to prostitute the profession, and so we could get into insurance. Okay, then it was back pain, neck pain. So what she did is she went to the chiropractor. The chiropractor said, well, the pancreas is here and it's supplied by the mid-dorsal area. So we're going to adjust you a couple of times a day until your blood sugar starts to restore. Now, within the first few days, blood, and I love this, she conducted her own urinalysis. She began to improve. Her urine became clearer. Her legs' ulcers began to heal and her toes pinkened up. She was so excited about not dying. Okay, would that make you excited? Okay, good, just checking. Yeah, she became one of the first women chiropractors. So now I was taught by her grandson. And he would go in because in our little office, we've seen rheumatoid arthritis corrected, tumors gone away, all this stuff. But it's all getting the body to heal itself. And that's all, because disease doesn't come from bad luck or bad genes. So when we talk about nerve supply, you need a healthy nervous system, because the nervous system controls and coordinates every function of the body. When we talk about regular exercise, does that move lymph and burn up the excess energy you might be exposed to? Absolutely. When we talk about proper nutrition, does that mean the way we ate 100 years ago when diabetes rates were 0.0028%? Yeah, granted they're a bunch of wacko organic natural foodists, but hey, let's go back to it. Did you get the sense of humor there? Okay, 1900, they didn't have the chemical companies running everything. Sufficient rest. And then prayer and meditation, because you got to have the mindset that this is not a disease that you got, it's a disease that you earned. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, now all of this is available on the owner's guide, including our totally cool handout. But just know that, if you're doing stuff, optimal health and death have no symptoms. If you do things that are of advantage, like eating healthy food, you're moving towards optimal health. If you get your nervous system checked, if you sleep good, if you rest good, if you have daily prayer and meditation, if you don't do any one of those pillars of health, guess which way you're moving? You're moving towards death. And you can, but I would miss you. Okay, now next Tuesday, we're going to talk about wound healing. Round 2 on skin health. So thank you very much.